Okay. Are we?
Yeah.
We're live.
Yeah.
Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Councillor Ian Edwards, and I chairman of the Central and South Planning Committee. Normal pre-business announcements. No fire alarm expected. If one sounds, we will be evacuating the building. The best way out is the way you came in, but then the double doors directly in front of you off to the left and down the spiral staircase. We will be going that way. We will escort you. If that's blocked, there are fire exits behind us. Mobile phones, can I please ask everybody to make sure their mobile phone is turned at the very least to silent. And also, I need to do the same to this one because I forget. And I don't want that one ringing. Hold on. Sorry about that. Feedback forms are available. If you would like to provide feedback on the way the business is going, that will be most helpful. This is a meeting that is being captured on YouTube, and so anybody that provides petitions to the committee and comes forward will be captured on the YouTube. However, members of the public sitting in the gallery are not. Of course, all the councillors are. I will just describe how the business is run. Can I assist you, sir? I will introduce them all to you if that helps you. No. But you may look. This is quite all right. Public meeting. It's important that you know who's who, and that was going to be my next point. The makeup of the meeting. Number of people sitting around the table. The committee is made up of councillors. They are the voting members, and they're on each of the arms coming down the table. And I will introduce them to you, starting on my left-hand side, Councillor Birra, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Dillon, and on my right-hand side, Councillor Yarrow, Councillor Lavery, Councillor Ahmed Wallana, Councillor Brighton, and Councillor Chapman. The other people around the table are officers of the council, and they're here to help in professional capacity. On my far left-hand side, Kerry Munro is our planning lawyer, gives legal advice. And Anisha Teji, sorry Anisha, for some unknown reason your first name slipped my mind. Anisha Teji, Democratic Services and clerks the meeting. James Rogers, Head of Planning, gives planning advice. Matt Kolowski. Kolashevsky, there you go. Kolashevsky. I'm going to have to write this one down. My apologies, Matt. I can get that bit right. He's planning team and will present each of the applications. Alan Tilley is our transport manager and will give highways advice. Okay, the meeting is a meeting in public. However, there are no general speaking rights. The only people that can speak are those that are submitted a petition. And we do have a petition this evening, and there is an agreement of 5 minutes speaking time between the petitioner and the agent or applicant, as it is a petition in support and from the same parties. The meeting is also in two parts. There are the ordinary planning committee applications that you will hear, and you are welcome to remain throughout those applications. There is a part two, though, which is when we break and move into private discussion around matters of enforcement, and those matters are held in private because they could result in legal action being taken. However, the topic and the decision are published. It's just the discussion that is in private. Okay, we will very quickly go through some agenda items, but it will be a matter of seconds, I hope. Agenda item 1, please. Apologies for absence.
Apologies received from Councillor Chamdal with Councillor Lavery substituted. Thank
you very much. Declarations of interest coming before the meeting this evening. Are there any additional interest items? No, thank you very much. Item 3, sign and receive the minutes of the previous meeting dated the 6th of February. Are they agreed, please? Agreed. Thank you. Item 4, there are no matters that have been notified in advance or urgent. Item 5, that is to confirm there are Part 1 and Part 2 items. Item 6 is an application with a petition that has been withdrawn, so we're now going straight into application number 7, 31 Manor Lane, Hillingdon. Matt, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application is seeking planning permission, the raising and enlargement of the roof to create habitable roof space to include a rear dormer, a front dormer, and the conversion of the roof from hip to a gable end. I'll just take members through the slides. You can see the site in red there. Okay, there's the site, you can see just there. No, number 31. The existing house, the roof plan and the floor plan, bungalow, sorry. There's the existing again. It's the proposed roof plan. You can see the rear dormer along there, the front dormer, and you'll have the hip to gables here. Sorry, the hip to gables at the ends with the dormer here. Here's the proposed. You got the front elevation with the front dormer there and the hip to gable extensions to the side. You can see on this side elevation how the ridge is being raised and the pitch of the roof is actually increasing to facilitate the conversion of the roof. And here you have the rear extension with a rear dormer that's 10.2 metres wide. And the rear dormer would be set in from the roof edges by 1 metre, as you can see on the rear elevation. Despite this setting, which is compliant with HDAS recommendations, the application property is wider than average, which is further enlarged by the addition of gable ends to both sides, and the dormer window would subsequently have a width of 10.2 metres. As such, it is considered to appear over-dominant within the roof plane within which it sits, and with a limited set-down from the ridge of only 0.25 metres, it creates an appearance of a flat-roofed first-floor extension. The applicant has... actually, let me take you through the photos. I do apologise, because they're quite important. There's a front of the property as it exists. Here you have number 29, sorry. Again, the front of the property. Here you can see, if I can just open my plan so I can reference the exact addresses. Bear with me, please. Thanks, James. Yeah. So, yeah, so here you have number 33 at the end there, which is only 8.6 metres away from the side of the proposed side extension, proposed roof extension. Then you can also see the next door neighbour here already has a rear roof extension that was approved under permitted development. The applicant has raised the dormer, which has already recently been constructed at number 29, which is here, as a precedent for the size of the proposed dormer. However, this was approved under permitted development, and so the impact of this dormer on the surrounding area could not be considered at the time. As this proposal involves the raising of the roof, it cannot be considered as permitted development, and as such needs to be determined based on the council's published policies. So that's the key difference between next door, which is being cited as precedent. Again, this is PD, and what they're proposing. What they're proposing at the subject site, which has to be considered against council policies because it does not constitute permitted development. The proposal would also result in a tall brick wall less than 1 metre from the garden of number 33. And so you can't quite see from the photos because of the trees, but number 33 is here, and you would have a brick wall that's 1 metre from the garden number 33. So it is considered that it would create the feeling of over-dominance to users of the garden. It's also important to note this house is actually only 8.6 metres away from the side of the proposed dormer. This is exacerbated by the fact that the garden area of number 33, if I just take you back to the site location, there you go, you can see it beyond the trees. And you can actually see it better from the front elevation. So again, it's here. So it is quite close. But if I show you on the floor plan, the site plan, it's actually a little bit better. You can see, so you've got the subject site there with the dormer going here and the gables, and then you've got number 33, which is 8.6 metres away. So this, as I was saying, this is exacerbated by the fact that the garden area of number 33, as you can see there, is already limited in its size. Subsequently, it is considered the proposal would have an unacceptable impact on number 33 Manor Lane by reason of the loss of outlook and sense of over-dominance. It is noted that the current occupiers of number 33 have signed a petition of support. However, the residential amenities of any future occupiers need to be protected. For the reasons summarised, it is recommended that the application be refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Did you wish to comment? We have the petitioner, Preet Singh. You wish to speak? Your agent. Thank you very much. Yes, please do. Please come forward. Make yourself comfortable. There's no microphone there. Hold on 2 seconds. We're going to have to just adjust the room. I've just noticed there is no microphone available for you. And the difficulty is that without the microphone, your petition is not captured on the system. Okay, once you're comfortable, you'll see in front of you the microphone with a toggle on and off button in front. You'll have 5 minutes speaking time. We will... No, you just press it down and it'll turn on. It's a toggle on and off. 5 minutes speaking time. You'll have 4 minutes with a green light, 1 with an amber, and I must draw you to a close when the red light comes up at the end of 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mrs. Nehar Abiwadana. I'm the architect and the agent for the application. I'd just like to note, first of all, that I was also the architect for the adjoining site, so at number 29 Manor Lane. And the one important point that wasn't mentioned by the planning officer, the petition specifically raised the fact that the number 29 is owned by a councillor as well, and we just wanted to make that clear before I go on. So I'll just quickly read out what I've written. The applicants are well-respected local residents who intend to live in the house for the foreseeable future. They intend to grow as a family and plan to accommodate their elderly parents who are currently living in Southall on completion of the development. A petition was signed by 22 signatories of nearby residents who shared concerns that the local authority was able to approve a similar scheme at 29 Manor Lane, however was recommending the applicant's proposals at number 31 for refusal. Signatories agreed that the applicant's application is not being considered in relation to the recently approved scheme at number 31, but rather emphasis is being given to planning policies. They are baffled as to why, when the architect is the same, the scheme almost looks the same, the context is the same, and the constraints are the very same, the application is being recommended for refusal, despite us making the amendments that were recommended by the planning officer, Mrs. Charlotte Spencer, during the planning process. The house is a bungalow, as it's been noted, with bedrooms on the ground floor with a side entrance. With the recent constructions at number 29, the bungalow is now subordinate. You'll see in your photographs there's a picture of a flank wall that comes right up on the boundary of the applicant's property just there. So this was permitted, and this was an under-permitted development, by the way, this side extension. This has created darker, colder rooms at the ground floor, and a lot of the rooms that are habitable are now overshadowed. The entrance to the house, which is also down that side path, it's also now darker due to the flank wall. And therefore the applicant is simply seeking to improve the family's quality of life by moving the bedrooms that are currently on the ground floor to the first floor, which is still going to remain as a bungalow, but a shallow bungalow, and introducing windows to bring in more natural daylight from the rear, as it is limited from the sides. The property will not become a two-storey house, but a chalet-style bungalow, which still gives the appearance of a bungalow similar to number 29, from the front and the rear. The proposals at number 31 are very similar to the approved scheme, which I also prepared drawings for and made the application for. Mr. James Roger will probably remember we had some very in-depth conversations about the application. The rear dormer was never an issue, it was always the front dormer. We had no conversation about the impact of that dormer on other residents, and there are a number of residents around that area, which I'm surprised the planning officer, the photographs that have been taken, there's no context really at all except for one block on the side, but the majority of the buildings around, especially on the rear, all have dormers facing the applicant's site, the adjoining site, and number 33. The officer states that the dormer at number 29 was approved under permitted development, therefore its impact on the adjacent building and historical setting cannot be considered. However, as can be seen in the photographs, the dormer is now constructed, so you'll see a picture of the adjoining owner's property. that has very little impact on number 31, and my neighbour gets on very well with the councillor next door, and they have no issues with regards to the impact of that on his site. For that reason, the applicant made the choice to make this application because he felt the impact was so little to him, the impact would be very little to his neighbour at number 33. We also considered the effect on number 33 during the planning process, and this is the reason why we reduced the width of the dormer, to minimise the impact and demonstrated that the boundary between both properties is heavily screened. In summary, the proposal creates a substantially smaller building to those surrounding the site. Most are 2-storey, and 2 of them at least have been raised in height to make a 2-storey house instead of a bungalow. The house and rear garden at number 31 is currently overlooked by the surrounding buildings and is subordinate. The proposals at number 31 are no different to many of the surrounding properties and should be approved to allow the applicant to continue to live and grow in the home they love. The applicant has come to this committee to seek a recommendation for approval for this application, and in particular support from Heathrow Village Ward councillors. The application will improve the quality of life and well-being of the applicant and their family by overshadowing caused by the dominant side extension number 29, which was permitted by the local authority recently. We hope you will show the applicant support and not just review planning policies, but also look at the site, context and conditions created by recent developments, and most importantly, support of the local residents.
Thank you very much. That's quite well timed. Colleagues, are there any questions at all of the petition? Councillor Duncan.
Hello,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do you like to switch that off?
Yes.
You did say in your presentation that work had been carried on at the adjoining property number 29, and that your client's property at number 31, this had affected ground floor windows, made them darker. But on the plans that we have, I can't actually see any windows or openings that they may have affected.
I think the flank wall itself, it's not
Sorry, you're answering the question very well, and you used the opportunity very well to develop your argument, but I need to draw you to a close there. Questions, colleagues? Councillor Dillon.
Hi. That flank wall was an existing flank wall there, wasn't it?
No, it's very short originally. It was only 2.1 metres maybe. It's been raised significantly.
I'm sorry to be a nuisance to you. Can I ask you to use the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. It just takes some getting used to. Thank you.
I can't recall the exact height, but it was about 2.1 metres because it was the fence wall, and there was a little lean-to that leaned onto that wall itself. The planning officer probably has all the existing drawings for number 29.
Thank you very much. Colleague, any other questions at all? Thank you very much for your petition, and I invite you to return to your seat. There is, I believe I need to bring in here Mr. Roger, Head of Planning, just to clarify, and particularly for YouTube, the position with regards to the permission for number 29 and what we're looking at here.
Yeah. So, firstly, in terms of the so you've got the original bungalow, which has the front dormer on it in that photo, and then you've got the bit with the slightly lower roof, which is the bit that was originally a garage that then became the extension you can see Now that garage actually extended quite a way forward, and when members considered the merits of the side extension, you were mindful there was a garage projecting forward, and you can kind of, you'd have to look quite carefully, you can sort of see that there's different surfacing there. So that garage was actually over a metre projecting forward. So that garage was actually having some impact on the outlook from the front window of the adjoining property. So it's not quite as simple, I'd argue, as the agent portrayed to you, and you took that account when you made your decision. Now, turning to the rear dormer, so if I go to the, so that's the neighbour's rear dormer. And an important point to stress here is that dormer is not a metre off the end gable wall. It's set in, it's actually been built above the original bungalow. And because of that, it was actually a permitted development proposal. So we were not taking into account whether that impacted upon visual amenity, overlooking, or any other material planning considerations, because it was a lawful development. Had they built it a larger dormer, then it obviously could have been something we would have required planning, and we'd have looked at whether it was too big and bulky. But that dormer is not the same scale as the one being proposed. As Matt mentioned, the one being proposed is 10.2 metres wide. It is a bigger dormer, put quite simply, and that is why your officers have concern about the visual appearance of the dormer. We would be less concerned if it was a smaller dormer. And one of the implications of the larger dormer and doing the hip to gable is you end up having development that's very close to the neighbour's property. And I'd have to say that I struggle to see how the hip to gable could be built without doing some trimming back of that tree there, because it looks like it's touching the side of the development proposal. Okay.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, this is a matter of judgment about the impact of the, for me, the gable wall end is the most impacted. Less so the absolute width of the dormer, and so I believe we should focus very much on that itself. And what I would like to do is just feed back to you, regretfully, some of the comments that were made by the petitioner about a much smaller dormer window, creating a very dark space in the very smaller gable end wall, saying it created a dark space in their back garden. Very dark, very gloomy, and drastically affected the garden. Now, what we're approaching is, what is being proposed is an even bigger gable wall, directly abutting a garden and only 8.6 metres away from property. And therefore, it is likely to have a significant impact on the garden space. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for raising that point, because I think that is one of the most important points about this development. And I thought that it was part of our policy that if you have rooms to a habitable, windows to a habitable room, and something in the nature of two-storey development is created, there should be a distance of 15 metres. And I'm mindful that the officer advised us it's 8.6 in this case. And in effect, at the moment, you have got virtually a single-storey building there, because the hipped roof going away from the neighbouring property would not add a great deal of height so close. Now it is going to become quite a substantial feature, and I think 8.6 metres is just too close, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I absolutely agree with Councillor Dillon. Sorry.
All right, Councillor Duncan.
It's addictive. Making those kind of mistakes addictive tonight. I think as a committee, we've always sat and gone against officers, actually, on a distance of buildings that are habitable windows at second level. So I would concur and be in support of officers' recommendation here.
Thank you. Other views, colleagues? Councillor Yarrow, then Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Chairman. I also agree with what my colleagues have said over there. I think the problems that we all have is that it appears to be unfair because of what's been built next door, but they were built under different conditions and different times. As it stands now, this is going to be overbearing on the people in number 33, isn't it? And I think we have to look at that fact. I'm also surprised that with some changes to the design, it could very well be down for approval. And I'm surprised that hasn't been discussed with the applicant to make those changes before we got to this stage.
Councillor Lavery?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we've got two things. The size of this dormer creates effectively what looks like a flat first floor roof, which is never an incredibly attractive feature of a building. I know sometimes with permitted development we almost end up there, and I have my views on those, but when they're coming before us, I mean, you've got something that looks like a box on the top. I also concur with colleagues. You've got other properties, not the one that's been extended, but the ones that we're looking at the back, 8.6 metres away. Now, that is very close for what is getting close to a two-storey height by the time this is finished. Now, ordinarily, we would be looking not to approve those because the outlook does become quite gloomy for those people. This is one of those that if you hadn't raised the roof and taken the thing all the way to both ends, then, you know, there might be a different outcome on the table. But I don't see anything that would make me want to differ with officer recommendations.
Thank you very much. Okay, unless there's views. Thank you very much, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Berry, you're seconding. Show of hands, please, on that one. That is unanimous. The application has been refused for the two reasons stated in the officer's report. Okay. Thank you. Turn now, please, to agenda item 8, number 10, Baxter Close.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. The application proposes the conversion of an existing dwelling into one 3-bed dwelling and a studio flat. The application involves changes to the principal and rear elevations of the property. The studio flat will be located to the side where the property has been previously extended. Take members through the slides. We've got 10 Baxter Close here. Existing floor plans, the dwelling, existing elevations. Oh, sorry, that's the existing elevation. I mean, it's not changing. Quite. So you've got the proposed ground floor plan here, and existing first floor and existing ground floor here. So the changes, physical changes, are to the ground floor. Take members through the photos. Back garden. You can see the existing extension where the studio flat will be located. That's the extent of the photos. The application site is located on the northern side of Baxter Close and comprises a detached dwelling. So the northern boundary of the site is bounded by residential rear gardens of properties on the larches. The property has been extended by way of a single-storey side and rear extension, which you can partially see from this photo. The housing standards, March 2016, sets out the minimum internal floor spaces required for developments in order to ensure that there is an adequate level of amenity for existing and future occupants. A one-bedroom, one-person flat is required to provide 39 square metres. A minimum of 37 square metres is considered acceptable where a one-person dwelling has a shower room instead of a bathroom. The studio flat that is proposed would provide a floor area of just 24 square metres, which falls considerably short of the requirement. A 3-bedroom, 2-storey, 5-person property is required to provide an internal floor area of 93 square metres. The property would have an internal floor area of 130 square metres, and hence is considered to satisfy the London plan. Furthermore, the habitable rooms would enjoy a satisfactory outlook. The Hillingdon Design and Accessibility Statement residential layouts requires a studio one-bed flat to be provided with at least 20 square metres of amenity space. The proposal would provide a private amenity area of 15 square metres for the studio flat, so 5 square metres below the minimum standard, and a 3-bed dwelling would retain some 180 square metres, which is far in excess of the 60 that's required for a 3-bed property. Therefore, the amenity space provided for the studio flat is not considered to be sufficient outdoor private amenity space. So this, together with the studio being below the minimum size standards, is considered unacceptable, and for these reasons it is recommended that the application be refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Avery.
I would wholly agree with the officer's recommendation. It's an unsatisfactory proposal that's going to give rise to a poor property with little amenity space. So I'd be quite happy to propose officer recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dillon.
And I'll be very happy to second it.
Unless there are any other issues? No, we show of hands that on, please. Thank you, that's unanimous. Number 9, 1 to 3 Bakers Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks planning permission for a change of use from retail, which is use class A1, to a flexible retail, office, restaurant, clinic, health centre, gymnasium use, which is A1, A2, A3, D1 and D2. The permitted use for the ground floor of the site is currently solely retail. However, in order to operate part of the site as a yoga studio, the ground floor would need permission to also operate under use class D2. The current application therefore seeks permission for the ground floor of the site to be used for use classes A1, A2, A3, D1 and D2 under a flexible plan permission to meet current market demands for uses. I'll just take members through the slides. I'm sure you know 1 to 3 Bakers Road is right next to the Travelodge Hotel by the station. You have I think that's the existing, as approved or existing, and here you can see so there are 2 units, now there'll be 3, and just some photos. So this is where it will be split. So you've got the existing 1 to 3 Bakers Road development. And just apologies, just some context. So again, the site is located at 1 to 3 Bakers Road. The existing 9-storey property is predominantly residential with retail units at the ground floor and a gym at first floor level. The the existing development gained planning approval in 2013 and construction subsequently completed with the ground floor units remaining vacant ever since. The application site is within the Uxbridge Town Centre and is located in very close proximity to both Uxbridge Bus Depot and Uxbridge Underground Station. The site has a high P-TAL of 6, reflecting its proximity to the transport nodes, a range of retail, commercial and office activities commensurate with the town centre designation are to be found in the surrounding area. The site does not fall within a primary or secondary shopping area, and therefore there is some flexibility regarding appropriate alternative service uses. It is considered that providing a flexible use would provide an active frontage, as it would encourage footfall and would allow for a vacant unit to become more marketable. It is considered that the proposal, subject to appropriate conditions, would not be detrimental to highway or pedestrian safety and would not result in an unacceptable loss of amenity. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dillon, then Councillor Lavery.
I have no issue with this. I think they'll struggle to let these, so as much flexibility always helps. So, leave officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor
Lavery? I have no issue with the proposal, and I again think the more flexibility we can create, the better, because these small retail units are going to struggle to let where they are, I'm afraid. My only queries, I know these are carried over from the existing permission, but again, in the light of trying to be as flexible as possible, given that we are next to the bus garage, which probably works 20 to 21 hours a day, I'm not sure whether restrictions on servicing the units, restricted between 8 and 6, Monday to Friday, and not at all on Sundays and bank holidays, are entirely appropriate. I know they're on the original, but I would just raise the question, there's buses thundering past the whole time, so why can't they have a delivery on a Sunday if they want one? And we're also restricting the use of the A3. I don't argue about the 2300, because I think that's fair, but we're saying nothing before 8 in the morning. Well, the buses start at 5, so if somebody wants to come in here with a cafe use or something that starts at 5 or 6 o'clock, is that a problem? It's just where we are in
You
the
made
only
some
reason I raised it.
some strong points there. I'll pass that to the head of planning for consideration.
I'm not actually going to argue with any of the points raised because it's next to the bus depot. So I think, could I leave it at that at the moment?
Well, what I'd prefer not to do is get into the negotiation now over the opening hours and the delivery hours. What I believe we should be doing then is to delegate to the head of planning, and I would be comfortable for the head of planning to be making an appropriate decision there, taking the lead here of the committee, which is to make sure that we can support the hub interchange there between the tube and the bus, recognising that will be starting at 5 in the morning, and a cafe at that time might be appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I Chairman, through you, I'd be more than happy for the head of planning to do it, but reviewing conditions 5 and 6 just to make them more workable would be.
Rather than leave it open-ended, shall we? I'd be quite comfortable changing it from 0800 to 0700 the hours of use, and then just making it 8 till 6 all days of the week, because I don't think, I mean, the bus use isn't going to stop on Sundays and bank and public holidays, so I don't think there's a relevance to that at this particular site.
Councillor Duncan?
Yes, I just wanted to ask about the servicing, because there are flats above, and although you've got buses thundering past at the front of the building, part of the servicing, I believe, is at the rear of the building, which will be quieter for those flats. So it would then introduce sort of disturbance for those who currently have a quieter period, if you like.
Again, a fair observation.
Sorry, I'm not, because of the bus station, because it has that open frontage, there's probably, all around the buildings, probably quite high background noise levels. I'd actually be surprised if there's any facades of this building that have the kind of background noise levels that often apply when we're introducing conditions 5 and 6. But I'll leave it to councillors.
Councillor Dillon.
And with tubes leaving and arriving, and that sort of area, it just echoes around there, so I don't think it's going to make any difference to, not conditioning the rear of the building.
We're quite close to the railway.
Do other colleagues have a view? Because there does seem to be a slight dissension from removing the restriction on Sunday and bank holidays. Do other colleagues have a view here? I've not heard from some people. Councillor Yarrow?
Yeah, I mean, can we establish, well, we don't know what's going to go in these. It's going to be open for anything that's got the money to pay for the rental. I would expect the deliveries to those places to be made at the front. I can see there's an alleyway down the back. If there's possibility that some of them will be serviced at the back, then it does alter what we've been saying about the quietness of the flats above. So I think we need a bit more information on that.
Matt?
Yeah, if I could just answer that. I'd actually dealt with the original planning application about 6 years ago now. From memory, I'm pretty sure that the refuse collection isn't done by the council, it's actually done by a private contractor. I'm pretty sure there was a condition on there at that time. Well, that's changed since. I don't think it has. Also, in terms of deliveries, there is space at the back for a small van to get in. However, anything larger than a transit, the delivery is actually from Bay. That's, I think, in front of Poundland opposite. So they actually have to cross the road. So I don't know if that helps or not with the discussion.
Councillor Lavery?
Well, I would suggest that does, because if you talk about the larger lorries, they're technically going to have to be out the front, and they're the ones that would cause the disruption. A small transit doesn't. With the background noise in that area, transit's not going to do it. But the big delivery lorries have got to go out the front. I think that just confirms the point.
Yeah.
So I think that is helpful.
Yes, that is very helpful. I do remember that we had a site visit on this, and I do remember that we went along and you could see, I can remember from the plans, the rear units, but it's quite right that the larger servicing had to be from the front, and I'd forgotten that, so thank you to Councillor Lavery for remembering that. I've got no problem with a little cafe opening at 5 in the morning. I don't think that's going to disturb anybody. It was really just the deliveries. And so if they're going to be restricted to, what were we saying, 8 o'clock or something? yes, I think that's quite reasonable.
Okay, so again, the energy here is for going with the officer's recommendations, but amending condition number 6 to delete Sundays and bank holidays, so that delivery is allowed 8 till 6 Mondays to Fridays, 8 to 6 all week. And the operating hours, the suggestion was changing from 0800 to 0700. Is that enough, or?
I can.
Okay, there you go.
do that.
0700. With those two changes, then it has been proposed. And do you second?
I said I would second. Yeah, I'll second it, subject to those changes.
Thank you very much. Proposed and seconded by Councillor Dillon and then Councillor Lavery. Then a show of hands, please, on those two. That's everybody. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Agenda item 10, number 35, Hillingdon Road.
Oh, you might have an issue on this, an issue. This is to say,
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of a part 2-storey, part single-storey side rear extension and the conversion of the dwelling to an 8-bed HMO. I'll just take members through the slides. We've got the site located here on Hillingdon Road. This is the existing ground and first floor plans, existing elevations, and the proposed floor plans. Again, proposed floor plans show the layout, and proposed elevations show the considerable side and rear extension. The application property comprises of a end of terrace dwelling located on the western side of Hillingdon Road. The property site is in the immediate setting of a Grade 2 listed building, which is number 34 Hillingdon Road. The extensions are considered excessive in terms of their scale. Actually, let me show you some photos. I do apologise. So you've got the existing dwelling here, and it's going to be a 2-storey side extension and rear extensions along there. Sorry, in context, you've got the Grade 2 listed number 34 site here. Extension will go in there. I think it's the side of the property. The photos from the rear. I'll go back to the front photo in terms of in context. The extensions are considered excessive in terms of their scale and would subsume the original end terrace dwelling. This in combination with the loss of the important gap between it and the adjacent listed building is considered to result in an incongruous addition to the street scene. The proposal would also represent an unneighbourly form of development, would fail to provide adequate on-site parking and would result in the provision of a habitable room with no source of natural light or outlook. I'll just point members to the addendum for item 10. We are proposing an additional reason for refusal. It's at the bottom of the first page. In essence, it's the over-intensification of the use. So it's 8-bedroom HMO, which could actually house up to 9 people because one of the bedrooms is larger. And it's the impact of that on the residential amenities of adjoining occupiers. For the reasons summarised, it is recommended that the application be refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. I would like some clarification, please, on the occupancy of an HMO bedroom over 10 square metres, because my understanding is that each of those could take 2 people, and that would put the potential occupancy at 15, not 9. So could this be checked, please? I know the report says 9, but my reading of the policy online would suggest otherwise.
I would concur with the points you're making, Chairman, about what the guidance says.
Okay, so where the report says 9, it could be 15. And the over-intensification, therefore, I think is even better made out. Thank you. Okay, colleagues. Discussion, please. Councillor Duncan.
Looking at the photograph, not that one, there was another one which showed the Grade 2 listed building, and there appeared to be side windows to that. Yes. Possibly to habitable rooms. And on this proposal, there's certainly a first floor room to the kitchen diner extension proposed, which would be, which would give rise presumably to overlooking, and also not be the requisite 15 metres away from a two-storey building. So I don't know that that is encompassed in the reasons for refusal. It does talk about over-dominance, overshadowing, visual intrusion, loss of outlook and loss of sunlight, but it doesn't talk about loss of privacy. So if we could just
I'll pass
receive
that one
some
over
advice
to,
on
to
that.
our planning colleagues. From my recollection, I can't recollect windows to the side on this development.
So there are two windows serving the diner and kitchen, but if we were hypothetically approving it, we could have requested obscure glazing for the window where next to the reference to diner, because there's a reasonably large window at the front that would provide enough light and outlook. So I think that's the reason why it's not a refusal reason.
What about the people in the habitable rooms in the listed building next door? Because I think you would have to have some opening window, wouldn't you? Even if it's obscure glazed, and then there's noise and disturbance, and that's because of the close proximity, which is why we have 15 metres between.
But we've got reason too that refers to overdominance, overshadowing, loss of outlook and loss of sunlight.
Yes, but it doesn't talk about loss of privacy, does it? It doesn't talk about possible noise and disturbance, loss of residential amenity in that area, does it? I mean, look at it from the point of view of the people in the property that's going to be most affected, which is the Grade 2 listed building. There are windows to habitable rooms there, and what impact that's going to have. It's going to bring things closer to them, just a short, I don't know, metre or 2 metres away now, and there's going to be a window in the side where presently there isn't a window, and even if you put obscure glazing over that, part of it would have to be top-hung opening, I would think, because this is a kitchen diner. Anyway, it was just an observation. It's just something that I thought may strengthen arguments if it came to having to argue the case.
We'll press that one a little bit further around it. The issue of privacy with an obscure glaze may not hold, but the disturbance as a consequence of open windows.
We've got the extra reason in the addendum, though, that we've added that about the potential over-intensive use of the site being detriment to the amenity of occupiers of adjoining properties. So that could apply to the other half of to neighbours to both properties. We're not saying the refusal reason it applies to a particular neighbour. It could apply to both sets of neighbours.
As long as you've got it somewhere you can...
We have the additional reason on the over-intensification and the impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties.
I think we've covered everything apart from overlooking, but I don't think we could have overlooking because we could condition the windows obscure glazed on the diner as I'm in the proposed. It isn't, but we could. That's an issue we could overcome by condition, and that's why we wouldn't be able to refuse it.
Okay, colleagues, Councillor Lavery.
On that basis, I would have no issues with proposing we accept officer recommendations on this one. It is an unacceptable proposal. It is just too big.
With the amendment and the addendum, additional refusal.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Councillor Yarrow?
Yes, I'll second that one. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on this one. That's unanimously. Thank you. Application issues number 1137 Fairfield Road, Uxbridge.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of a two-storey side and single-storey, part two-storey rear extension and the conversion of the roof space to habitable use to include two rear dormers and two front dormers. Take members through the slides. Got the application site. Show members the existing elevations and the proposed floor plans and proposed elevations. The application property comprises a two-storey detached house located on the southern side of Fairfield Road, which lies within a developed area and a North Uxbridge area of special local character. The property has a single-storey gallery to the side and sits within a mature and verdant plot. It's important to note, photos, existing house as it looks, and neighbouring properties. A similar scheme was previously refused in 2017 and dismissed at appeal. The current scheme addresses all the previous reasons for refusal as well as the planning inspector's concerns and is therefore considered acceptable. For the reasons summarised, it is recommended that the application be approved. Thank you, Chairman.
Colleagues. Councillor Duncan?
I was just waiting to hear from my colleague from North Uxbridge.
You beat him to it.
I'm happy with it.
Councillor Duncan's moved, officer recommended, and Councillor Yarrow is seconded. A show of hands, please, on this one. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Number 12, 71A Column Avenue.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks prior approval for the conversion of the existing light industrial building to provide 8 residential units. The application site comprises a light industrial unit located on the western side of Column Avenue. The existing industrial building is red brick with a shallow pitch roof and roller shutter door to the front elevation and is set back from the road with hard standing to the frontage. The predominant form of development on Column Avenue is two-storey terraced and detached properties. I'll just take members through the proposed plans. Existing plans, obviously industrial building, proposed 8 residential units. Aerial views of Column Avenue. I believe that's the building there. And just some other photos of the area for context. The proposal is considered within the General Permitted Development Order 2015 as amended, which allows for such development subject to determination by local planning authority as to whether prior approval will be required. The application is not seeking full planning permission, and the GDPO 2015 only permits the local planning authority to take the following factors into consideration in the determination of such an application. Transport and highway impacts of the development. The GDPR actually specifies that to refuse an application like this, the impact would have to be severe on the public highway, contamination risks on the site, flooding risks on the site, and whether the authority considers the building to which development relates is within an area that is important for providing industrial services or storage or distribution services. And whether the introduction or an increase in the residential use of the premises in the area would have an adverse impact on the sustainability of the provision of these services. The prior approval application must be assessed against transport and highways impact, contamination, flood risk, and whether it is expedient to protect the light industrial use. The local planning authority In this case, the sole issue for members to focus on is the transport and highway impacts, and at this point I'll pass over to James Roger, the Head of Planning.
Yeah, so as Matt has explained, because this is a prior approval, issues such as whether members have concerns over the sighting of any windows overlooking, those kind of considerations don't fall into play. So the real issue on this one relates to highways and transportation. The scheme of delegation requires that any legal agreement be referred to planning committee. So the recommendation as it stands is that there be control over parking permits. So that requires a legal agreement. Hence, the report as it stands is recommending a legal agreement. In the build-up to the committee meeting, the applicant's agent has exchanged correspondence concerning whether it's justifiable for the council to request a legal agreement in this case, and effectively I do think it's something I should be drawing to your attention for you to decide as a committee whether it actually needs a legal agreement. I'll quickly set out the arguments for and against, if that is okay. So basically you've got 8 one-bed units, proposal is 6 parking spaces, so there's a slight shortfall of 2 spaces. Now, so the report as it stands, officers are saying that subject to removal of permits, that on balance we wouldn't wish to refuse an application. In terms of if this was something that were to go to appeal, and we were arguing that we required that we either wish to refuse it and or required the legal agreement, we'd have to talk about the harm caused by there not being those 2 extra parking spaces in effect. And members may have heard me say this before, but the MPPF talks about highway impacts having to be severe. So there's this particular bit in the MPPF that kind of raises the bar a bit higher when you're going to argue things on highways or parking than on other material planning considerations. The road that this development is off is Column Avenue, and if we were to see, one of the tools we use to argue any shortfall of parking issue would be parking stress on the highway, the surrounding roads. And one of the issues that I have to be upfront with committee is that from discussions with the highway officers and transportation officers, we're not aware there being severe parking stress issues on Column Avenue. Obviously there's lots of roads in this borough that do have severe parking stress, but from our observations of the immediate locality around this side, there doesn't appear to be parking stress issues. So where I would go is that there is probably a reasonable argument, counter-argument, dare I say it, not to have a legal agreement. And part of the reason I kind of wanted to put this before you, that I'm kind of wavering in terms of the recommendation, is that because this is a prior approval, we've only got till the 14th of March to basically make a decision. So if we do go with the recommendation as it's put, we've actually only got 7 days to sort out a legal agreement. So I'd go so far as saying I'm having serious second thoughts as to whether for 2 spaces we wish to, is reasonable for us to be asking this applicant to do a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
I'll bring you in a second. I would just like to make the point that any administrative difficulty is something that needs to be worn by officers. What we have to consider here is whether or not there is a need for this. So, Councillor Lavery.
2 things. Looking at the photographs that went up, and again, an appeal inspector would look at those as well. I'm far from convinced that you couldn't get 8 cars on the front of that site. Looking at that, I suspect you can get a lot more than they may have shown you 6, but I think you can get a lot more than that. I'm not an expert, but looking at the size of that parking area, I think you get at least 8 on there, which I don't think is going to help us. We've got a shortfall of 2 in a no parking stress area. That's not going to help us. Bearing in mind, and I've seen enough appeal decisions that we've lost on parking grounds, the words severe stress always come in. from my view, I don't think the legal agreement holds. If I'm truthful, I think we're on weak ground. As I say, it's a shame that it is prior approval because I'd have many other views about the scheme as presented. But I know those I can't air. But I don't think we've got anything to go with there.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I was just reading on page 85, second paragraph, where it says the submitted plans depict only 6 spaces being accommodated, but then it goes on to say the results show that implementation of the proposals that parking stress levels would increase up to 66%, which seems to be at variance with the earlier advice. It's on page 85, and it's the second paragraph.
Matt.
Yes, so if I may just address that point. It's not particularly clear there, but the applicant submitted a parking stress survey for Column Avenue, which shows that currently the parking stress is at 65%. So with those 2 parking spaces, additional parking spaces on-street parking spaces, it would go up to 66. Hardly a severe impact, I think.
So that
just to explain what those percentages mean in real terms. So 100% is all the streets full of cars. So a bad statistic would be over 100%.
Yes.
So 65 is not the sort of statistic. 66 is not the sort of statistic you want to see if you're looking to argue.
No. So, but it isn't. This doesn't cause 66. It actually caused it to go from 65 to 66, which is the important thing. I mean, I like Councillor Lavery. I'm much more concerned about all the side windows that are going to go in overlooking people's gardens. But, of course, we can't have anything to say about that, can we?
Unfortunately not. I'm not getting any argument here that this needs the 106 agreement or that we should be objecting on highway ground. Okay, so let's somebody take this forward, please. Councillor Lavery, then Councillor Dillon.
Well, I would say we accept the officer report deleting the request for the S106 agreement.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dillon, seconding. Show of hands, please, on that one. It's everybody. Thank you. That completes the part 1 of the meeting. We are now moving into part 2. So, gentlemen,